Okay, hello everyone. I am Clea Ostendorf. I am a security relationship manager at Code 42. Code 42 is a data protection insider threat company, and I work with teams to help build insider threat programs. So what I'm going to talk to you all about today is what I've learned, and some ways that you can build this into what you're currently doing and how to solve this human problem. So the reality is there are two types of people in the world: those who take data and those who lie. Think back to your last job. Did you email yourself some presentations that you did that you liked? Did you maybe send some of the code that you wrote to your own personal Git repo? The facts are we all take data. And as an organization, you have to think about what you care about and what you want to pursue and how you want to think about protecting your company's assets. Okay, so what is insider threat? More than a security buzzword, because the reality is we're talking about people, and we're talking about people who you trust. These are your colleagues, these are your friends. There's so much more than just this abstract hacker from Russia who's trying to get into your network. There's more than that. So for this discussion, I'm going to focus mostly on employees who are taking data to start a new company, when somebody is angry and they want to get back to you, or if they're trying to use the company for financial gain. And we're going to focus on indicators that you can use to be proactive to build out your current program. And just in case the term insider threat is offensive, there are many other ways you can think of this program. Personnel security, workplace violence, DLP. I think DLP kind of was first, and now we're trying to think about why are we losing data? Let's think about the human element. Enter insider threat, insider risk. Okay, and this is not going away. So as we all work remotely, those intangible controls that you think don't really matter are all gone. So rather than having to think like, is my coworker sitting next to me going to care if I stick in a USB and transfer all these presentations I worked on? Or, does it matter if I print out the customer lists? Will somebody see? Now we're in the wild, wild west, or we're in our own home offices. So you can do whatever the heck you want, and you're not usually going to get caught. And the truth is, I think most people don't do it maliciously, right? Like I have a external hard drive of my old laptop, and I don't mean to steal that data, but it's there. And I didn't know what I could and couldn't take, right? So it comes down to, do people know what's appropriate for them to take? If I create something, is it mine or is it the company's? And I think it's up to those who enforce these policies and systems to actually tell people what they can and can't do, because people are stupid. That should be the subtitle of this talk. Insider threats, people are stupid. Also the name of security. Okay, so let's start with a classic story time. In this case, there was an engineer who worked at WAMO. And WAMO, if anyone is not familiar with them, they are an autonomous driving technology group. It's a subsidiary of Alphabet, i.e. Google. And, they've been in and out of the news. So 6 weeks before his resignation, an engineer, Anthony Lewandowski, a high-level employee, downloaded over 14,000 files of highly confidential proprietary design information. He had access to these files. Didn't seem like anything out of the ordinary. They didn't catch this. Everyone said goodbye. Thank you for all your help. We really appreciate your work at this company. Keep in touch. We'll see you later. He then founded a trucking company for autonomous vehicles called Otto, O-T-T-O, which then was sold to Uber. all of a sudden, WAMO starts to look into this and sees the technology and says, hey, this looks awfully familiar. This looks like the IP and designs that my engineers spent thousands of hours on. I think this might be mine. So enter a lawsuit. It's big and messy. It's still pending. WAMO filed a lawsuit against Uber for trade secret theft. They sought over $1 billion settlement that did not go through, but just to put a dollar amount on when somebody's walking out with your IP, what it might look like. That's kind of where we settled. So a few kind of things that you can learn from this. Uber didn't steal the information, right? They bought a company that somebody brought that information into. However, they were still held liable and they're on the hook. So a few other things to learn about with this. Oops. We can also see that when Anthony was leaving, he took the data about 60 days before he left. So that's a pattern that we've seen across the board. When people are leaving an organization, they tend to start packaging up their data and their information and things that they want weeks before they put in their notice. Think about the last time you changed jobs. You knew you were leaving before you had that next job. You had to start to think about, what have I worked on over the last 3 years that's valuable, that I want to share, or that I think will help me in my next job? Let me package that up and email myself that. No harm done. I created it. It's all good. So that spike of data egress could have set off some red flags. It didn't. So what you could do if you see a spike like this in your DLP tool or your CASB or whatever you have for the visibility of data movement, start to think, what is this employee doing? Is there anything I need to look into? Has he put in his notice, etc.? Have there been any access requests to crown jewels that somebody might we might need to look into? And use your existing tools to start to alert on that. And the hard truth is you can try and recoup your losses of hundreds of hours of engineering time, but you're never going to. I mean, WAMO went from being a hot ticket to creating the newest technology to the reality is now they're one of a few who are trying to fight this battle. Okay, so another kind of way to build this in, and this is something that we do at Code 42, we promote this with our customers, is thinking about the highest risk employees. And we're going to start with departing employees because we know that they take data. So if we know that departing employees have a higher likelihood of taking data, let's put them in some sort of watch list to make sure that what they are taking is nothing we care about. So easy workflow, somebody puts in their notice, maybe they're using a system like Workday. From Workday, they set off another ticket to start to deprovision them or put them into some sort of watch list, use that same watch list to start to see what files they've been moving and touching and systems they've been touching to just make sure that they're not doing anything that you really you care about. So in the case that an analyst identifies something, go to the manager. This is one example. And then the manager has a few options. You can either talk directly to the employee, tell the employee to delete it. You can bring it to the HR executive who's doing the offboarding process and say, hey, we've seen you take these 6 files. This is IP that we care about. Delete them now. Do not use them, or we're coming after them. Case closed. Or they don't see anything, so you can close the case. The key for doing any sort of automated workflow like this when it comes to employees specifically is to do this for everybody. That's to remove any bias or favoritism that somebody might say, you did this for me because you had a vendetta against me and you didn't do it for my peer because you liked her. That's a cautionary tale. Other risk indicators that you can use for the same sort of process, this is sort of like your watch list if you have a SIM or if you're using whatever system you may be focusing on. Anyone with elevated access privileges, they're more likely to be able to take things or get into systems that you don't want them to touch. Another one that's interesting, and I don't think people always think about, is people who are failing phishing tests. So if somebody's consistently clicking on that link and failing your phishing test, they're probably going to be opening more doors, or they might be inadvertently sharing things publicly or what have you. So just watch that person, educate them. Stupid mistakes are stupid mistakes, but they can lead to something more dramatic. Another workflow, same looks like a standard workflow that you would have if you have some sort of ticket that you need to investigate. The key difference when it comes to insider threat or insider risk is you are looking at employees. So you're looking at your peers and you have to think of how you're going to report on that, do the investigation, make sure that you're not violating any employee privacy or GDPR regulations. And that's why it's really important to involve your legal and HR teams, those security leaders who have the support of HR, legal, perhaps an executive at the team or at the company. They're going to cover their bases a lot more and have less liability if somebody comes back and says, this is a vendetta against me, or prove it. This is take me to court. A more defined process and program is going to help you here. Yes, the old adage of let's buy a tool to solve a problem. Now, everybody knows that doesn't work. You can't just buy your way secure, as much as we all would hope and try and think that the latest buzzword on the RSA floor is going to save us. That's not the case. And with insider threat, that is 100% the case as well. So you have to think about why people are doing the things they're doing and try and get ahead of that. So some common precursors that we see, mergers and acquisitions. Great example. So that your company is going to go through some sort of M&A. What does that mean for the employees? Am I going to have a job? Is my role going to stay the same? What's my manager going to be like? What's my future at the company? I'm concerned. I better start looking for a new job. I better start looking through all the work I've done over the last 6 years to compile that so that I can present that to my new employer. One example. What about if somebody has HR violations or complaints, or if somebody is on a PIP or they didn't get a promotion? All of these things can help build resentment towards the company and make them want to either get back at the organization where they didn't get enough credit. So let's post it on Reddit, this great, brilliant plan I've come up with, and brag about it. No one will see because it's just an anonymous website. What if somebody says, you know what, I'm not getting the glory I want at this company. I'm going to start my own, and I'm going to take all the information that I worked on in the last few years and go start my own company, like the Waymo case. All of these things happen, and you have to start to think about, how can I get ahead of this to face this problem head on? So how can I get ahead of this? This gets back to the question of, what do you care about and what are you trying to protect? So again, this is high level. You always want to go into more detail. I know many of you are professionals at digging into threat modeling, but let's think about it from high level. What am I trying to protect? Where does it live? Who has access to it? And how can someone leverage it for financial or personal gain? And then, what controls do you have in place to protect it? Is it just visibility? Do you have training? Do you have some sort of blocking mechanism? Are you just monitoring it? Do you have any monitoring? Do you even know what's happening? All of these things you need to think about, but what you want to protect is critical. So a few things that I talk to my customers around is that data that you're trying to have visibility to around and see where it's going. So people think easily like, okay, code is what I care about, customer lists. But do you care about your HR data? So there was a case where a competitor of, I think it might have been Uber. Oh, no, it's Tesla. So a competitor of Tesla was starting a new company. They purposely recruited HR reps from Tesla because they brought over the comp plans, the bonus structure, the hiring practices, all of the things that you need to be competitive and have a leg up on your competitors. So you might not think that your comp plans or your strategy for recruiting the best engineers matters, but if it gets into the wrong hands, that's something you might be concerned about. One of my favorite stories is an insider trading story. So this is about a year old. This was following a Palo Alto admin who used his credentials to gain access to financial earnings reports that weren't protected. They weren't monitored at all. No one even really thought of them as something that they had to build some sort of controls around. And then he traded for years based on this report, sharing the intel across the board. He finally got caught. One of his co-conspirers were caught at the airport trying to leave the country. Very dramatic, but let's think about people who have elevated privileges and let's start looking at what they're touching and where they're moving it. And as I'm just breezing through this, because it's like talking to a screen, security is a people problem. Tools help, but you need to think about the people who are touching your systems, what motivates them to do things, and how can you have some visibility and controls in place that protect it. The reality is blocking is archaic. It doesn't work. You have to have the thing we all want, the visibility, but visibility is only as good as you're looking at your people. So do you have any employee incentive programs? If somebody goes on a PIP, what are you doing to make sure that they're okay and that they're going to rebound from that and they want to invest in the company? If you have an awareness program, are you also sharing what people can and cannot take? When you leave a company, can I take my slides or do I have to leave everything? And how about some training? What do you look for? Is it acceptable for your peer to use a USB or print off all this information? Or should you report that or call them out on that? Just things to think about as you bring in the human element to an insider threat program. Questions from the group?
Hey, great job. Let's see. I think there's one question here from David, actually.
How does the company weigh the cost of preventing IP theft in the first place versus legal? Right. So chasing after employees is expensive. It's unlikely that you're actually going to catch them. You're going to be entangled in a legal battle for years, and it's not scalable. So you don't want to sue your employees.
Well, no, and I think that's kind of the point.
Wait, what?
It's when someone walks off with IP, it's extremely expensive to get it back, and most of the time, you're then to the point where, oh fuck, just let it go, because it's going to be many thousands of dollars to fight it, it may be worth it depending on what that IP is. But from stopping it from happening in the first place, you're right. Tools aren't the only answer. But I'm curious, some of the things that we're struggling with is detecting the anomalous behavior. Some of the things that we've seen, and you mentioned it, like people start taking data 30 to 60 days before they leave. Other things that we've seen is people start deleting a bunch of data, before they leave. That could be another one of those indicators, like, oh shit, they just deleted gigs of data from, O365 or whatever it might be. And maybe that plays into some of this, beforehand detection of, someone possibly walking out the door with something.
Yeah, it gets back down to the basics. When somebody leaves, are you doing an exit interview and asking them, reaffirming, hey, just so you know, we've seen you take all this stuff, or we saw you delete all this. We have it on record. You cannot take X, Y, and Z. If you do, we will pursue it. Or one step further, you took all this information. Please delete it in front of me. Let's close this case, and then you sign this, and we will pursue you. That's what some companies do. I get the question, well, is that scalable? It depends on what somebody's taking. You should do an exit interview, hygiene for everyone. But if you don't, why don't you focus on the employees that are high value, or you've seen them do some activity that is suspicious?
What types of, you've been with, I think, Code 42 for, has it been a year now? A little over a year, right?
Yeah, a year and a half.
Oh, Jesus. Where does time go?
I know.
What kind of companies have an official insider threat program? It fully defined, that maybe they even have a functional team, that's their role, that's their job. Is it kind of all over the place, or is it once you get to 500 employees, you have a program? What have you seen?
Well, Dave, you should know this answer. Everyone has a defined AppSec program too, right?
Right. Touche.
Yeah, right. I think insider threat has been something that government organizations have cared about forever. But it has changed to now become something the private sector is considering and building because of just the sheer number and portability of data and how much people are moving. It's something people need to think about. But not many companies have a defined program. I think a lot of people are trying to solve this by a DLP program. And that's just saying, block it and shut this down. That's not reality in the work world that we work in today. So you need to think about, why are people doing things that they shouldn't, and how can we build a program around it? And then on top of that, you have to think about employee privacy. Who's touching this? Who's looking at this? Is this too big brother? How can I keep the culture? Because that's another thing that companies have to care about. All of a sudden, culture matters. It's not the 1980s where it's just, you're in your power suit and you're grinding away on your I don't even know what you used. What did you work on?
TI-84s. TI-84s.
No. TI-85s. Come on.
85s. There you go. Sorry.
Yeah, you're not taking that home with you. You're not emailing that out.
We had calculators. That was about it.
Yeah. Okay.
They were solar powered.
I think, from my perspective, insider threat is one of those things that encompasses so many facets. And without an actual defined program, you're going to fail at it. Period. People are walking out of organizations with data, IP every single day. And one thing that I'd be really interested in is how often are people actually using that data that they're walking out with, right? Whether it's marketing material, whether it's deep down internals, whether it's architectural diagrams, it'd be really interesting to know how much people are applying that in their next role.
Yeah, I'll go one step further and say, what do you actually care about if somebody uses, right? Right. It's really easy to say, don't take our arc diagrams, but what's the risk to the business if somebody uses that? If there's none, really.
Right. Right.
So,
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it goes back to what the company actually owns too, right? Because like, I mean, we know as consultants and going in, like processes and expertise is not something that the company necessarily like can take away from you or owns. And then there's the non-disclosure agreements and the signatures that go on SOWs and contracts that determine what that actually is. But I do feel like it's a very gray area, right? It's one thing when it's code and it's something that you've developed specifically for an institution. But
yeah, it feels like it's traditionally been such an, like, let's have these NDAs and let's have all these things, the PIAs and all these things in place up front, just in case someday we might have to do something about it. You know, for 15 years, I was in consulting across, 3 different consulting organizations. And technically, based on some of the things that I signed and all that, I went to competitors. So there could be some suing and things there. But like, maybe we're just doing this backward, right? I don't know. It's such a tough problem to think about, and I see it every day. I mean, we forever are adding more alerting and anomalous detection and things like that. But I don't, as the CISO, even know, like, when would we get to the point where it would be so important that legal recourse would be a must, right?
Yeah.
Like, where is that threshold? And I think a lot of, we're still fairly small, only 300 so employees, but I think a lot of organizations probably struggle with that alone.
Absolutely. And then they see all these alerts and all these things happening, and you're like, I'm overwhelmed. I can't do this. I don't know what to do. Get back to the basics. And what do you care about? What if it goes down, or if it gets out, is going to destroy your business or put a dent in your plans to go public or whatever? I hear a lot, well, we care about salespeople taking customer lists. And I say, okay, but I'm on LinkedIn, so I have all the contacts. So why does it matter?
Yeah.
So don't think.
Yeah, you can't take the actual Excel spreadsheet that you exported from Salesforce, but you have the same thing in your LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a hard problem. I can think of probably 3 things at Contrast that would be important enough for us to seek legal recourse, but those things would destroy us.
Well, that's what you need to protect and think about: who has access, how could they get access, worst case scenario, somebody has it, they download it, what form does that take? And then how can somebody get it off their endpoint or off your Google Drive or wherever it's shared? Yeah,
but to one of your earlier points, like, a lot of times it's kind of on accident. People are backing up their systems. Sure, we block, USB drives or whatever, but everyone's connecting to iCloud and Dropbox and, all of these different things. It's just.
Well, do you let them do it?
Well, of course we do. We're a startup, right? Like, there's this. So I don't know if you guys have read this Honest Security piece. Did anyone read it? Go to honest.security. It really kind of created kind of a little wave in the InfoSec industry in the last couple of weeks about, like, the molding together of personal and business work on corporate-owned devices. And it's a struggle, right? As a startup, the talent that comes to you has a way of life that they expect. And to retain that talent, you have to give in to a few things. And some of that is less restrictions on endpoints. You go to a financial services organization, you have no choice, right? But they're probably not retaining the crazy talent that maybe a startup can get. So there's this balance that we have to deal with. And that, I think that's a struggle for a lot of, fast-paced, fast-growing startups, because like at some point you have to start making those hard decisions. But when does that point? When does that begin? And we're close. I'm going to be honest, we're close.
Yeah, and Dave, I want to bring this up on the flip side too. The large organizations, right? Like I understand the startup mentality and the startup culture, because like we've lived that over the last few years. But as a consultant, like how many times have you walked into a large organization and they're like, "Hey, we want you to test this. Here's a laptop," and you're like, "Okay, I have to first like break the security of this laptop just so I can actually do what you want me to do," right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
It's almost like you're subverting those controls out of the gate because of kind of this IP, like NDA, like everything is classified and all the data. Like somebody at some point decided that anything that's not public needs to be protected by 10 levels of security, right? And it realistically doesn't lend towards finding that talent that you're talking about, right? So pulling in someone that's got some security, I hate saying InfoSec rockstar, but whatever like level
The
of
unicorn,
talent, Seth,
the
unicorn, yes. So I struggle with this idea, because I walk into so many organizations where it's just so difficult to get even my job done on a daily basis, right? But then what I find, like once you kind of crack that nut, or you're following those paths, that you can still send all the data right out the door, via GitHub or via something else, right? So all those protections are basically really non-existent, because they haven't planned for the future, right? They're not watching the gate, or the front door. They're watching all of the side doors.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to finding that happy medium, between policy, process, and restrictiveness, right? Like I still go back to an old colleague. Their small consulting shop got acquired by a massive conglomerate, worldwide consultancy, and he was the mobile security practice lead. They get acquired. He goes in there, and we're like, "Oh, by the way, you can't jailbreak or root any devices because of the agreements we have with Apple and Google and whomever else." And they're like, "Okay, that's just destroyed that part of the business."
Yeah.
Right. So, but there's a balance, right? And that goes back to my first question, like, where is that line for an organization? And it's probably something that needs to be defined, as far as like, what's the IP that's important? What does that mean as far as flexibility of allowing people to use iCloud and iMessage and the personal things on a laptop, which seems trivial, but that does allow them to much more easily take data. I mean, let's just be real. I could throw things in a Dropbox in 10 seconds.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that I think this industry is going to struggle with. It was easy before. You just blocked access to external hard drives. That doesn't work anymore.
No. Yeah, networks are way quicker. Well, and so I wanted to call this out. Like, I know, Clea, you were talking about, some of the lawsuits and things that had happened in the past year. Like specifically, I'm thinking about, I think it was the Waymo, right? Like the self-driving cars, like with Uber and Waymo, and that one employee that basically moved from, I can't remember which way it was, right? If it was Uber to Waymo or whichever.
It goes this way all the time.
Yeah. But I know that there was all sorts of lawsuits that went back and forth, because they were saying basically because that employee went to work for the new company that they were stealing secrets. And like it got super weird, right? Because I'm like, well, if that's all in his head.
So what,
Yeah.
Clea,
Do you remember that?
Can you enlighten us?
It's almost as if employees are intellectual property themselves, right? That's kind of
and
they are.
that's the other thing, right? And it really, the next session with Laura about DE&I, like, you know, moving away from treating people as a resource to a person, you know, but yeah, I mean, we have brains, it's full of things as well. But with the Waymo thing, was that like a corporation legal battle, or were they going after the person? I didn't catch that.
A little of
Both?
both. Yeah. So the person who's
I'm posting the article right now, right?
Yeah, he's going to
So-
jail. He's going to jail.
Yeah.
He has, I think, a couple million he has to pay back, and he's going to jail. Yeah, it's pretty bad. So one way to also look at this is, you don't want to be the company who has somebody bringing something in. So in the first 60 days that somebody starts at an organization, why don't you monitor what they're downloading? You shouldn't be downloading gigs and gigs of data. If they are, look at it and say, like, you know, you can't have this here, get it off, because we're going to be liable.
Yeah, I thought it was amazing to call out M&As, because M&As are so, you know, they're all over the place, especially in security. You know, and doing that due diligence from a legal and IP perspective of that M&A. I'm glad I'm not in that job. You know, because, you know, if you're an organization and go out and acquire another one, there's just so many unknowns, and there's never enough time to dig into all those unknowns. So yeah, this is definitely, you know, this is like the next thing on top of the third party OSS type issues that we're dealing with in the security industry, that I don't think we know or have an answer at all. I mean, tools aren't there. You know, there's a few that can help, but people are the problem.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it just gets back to dumb end users, right? Doing stupid things. And you should just let them know, like, hey, you have 100 files shared publicly. Is that intentional? Or should we?
I mean, I agree, but to your earlier point about, you know, some of the phishing and people, you know, that click on links all the time, they're just not aware, and you can tell them 700 different times to, you know, pay more attention or do something differently, and it's not going to ever sink in, because they don't understand it at that, you know, breadth of what they're doing at all, is where we're going to run into problems. Believe me, phishing is, don't talk to me about phishing.
Tell us how you really feel, Dave. No, so I wanted to call that back and pull it back to like code specifically, right? Because I feel like that's an easier prospect to actually, you know, talk to the developers. You're already talking to them about like all these different application security vulnerabilities and, you know, everything that goes into that. So having a discussion about, yeah, you probably don't need to pull that code to, you know, your personal device, and you don't need to push to GitHub in a, you know, on your personal account, right? Like that kind of stuff feels more approachable to me than it does the, okay, this is the, you know, the algorithm behind the scenes, or this is the layout of our architecture. Some of that is very abstract, as opposed to what's actually like physically written. Well, yeah, whatever written code, you know, that's stored in GitHub or some other repository.
Absolutely. Build it into your existing training program. I mean, that's the only way it's going to be effective.
Yeah.
Or one way.
We do have one comment. Eric is saying, yeah, they shouldn't be aware. I don't know about this though. You know, it's a failure of InfoSec as a reason that they would even be allowed to do these dangerous actions. I think there's always places where InfoSec is going to fall down, right? Like specifically to Dave's point, phishing. Like, you know, how effective is it? How often does it actually succeed?
Yeah, I mean, so we can talk about phishing all night. You know, the way that we trade it here is it's a blameless thing. You know, even I'm telling you guys right now, like there are so extremely targeted phishing attacks when like a third party that you may interact with is compromised. Anyone on this chat here would fall for it, period.
Yeah.
And there is not technology, people, or process in this world that can prevent those things. It's a scary, scary thing. And it's going to continue to happen. So we have to treat it as a blameless thing, but at the same time, learn from each one. But I still think this insider threat thing to me, I do lose sleep at night over it. Like I said before, there's probably 3 things that I'm most concerned about for walking out the door for us. I'm sure our CEO would say there's 5 or 10, right? And maybe him and I need to get on the same page, but it's one of those things that I think will only grow over time as we continue to become less restrictive on user endpoints, because I think we probably will.
Yeah. I mean, it's all one device now. Home, work, personal.
Yeah. When was the last time you guys used a personal laptop? I'm curious.
I have 2 here, but I don't know if they're charged.
I mean, I have an iPad Pro. I have an old laptop that hasn't been turned on in about a year. But it's crazy. Awesome. Clea, it's been wonderful. Appreciate your insight.
Yes, thank you. It's good to see your face, Clea.
Thank you, Clea. It's good to see you.
Bye, everyone.
Have a great night.